Hi, good morning. Let's give a couple of minutes. We'll start at 11 on the dot, right? Hi, good morning, everyone. Hi, welcome. Or I should say, good afternoon to some of you. Welcome to our Veeam session on Microsoft 365 backup checklist. I'm Dick Si. I'm based out in Singapore. I'm the SE manager for Southeast Asia plus Korea. Right. Today's topic basically going to cover about Microsoft 365 on Veeam Backup as with the latest version 6, right? And basically to go through the steps and what to look out for during your setting up of your Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, right? Hopefully within this hour, I can show you some of the things to consider and followed by, last but not least, a demo. Right. So before we begin, basically just want to highlight why do you need to back up Microsoft 365 since this is already on the software as a service. Basically, there's 7 reasons why you need to back up Microsoft 365 back, right? So one of the key things that we always believe that there tends to be accidental deletion situation whereby users may accidentally delete and forget about it and goes beyond the retention gap within Microsoft 365 that users require that data to be restored maybe after more than 90 days, right? So one of the key things is accidental deletion. The other thing that I say earlier on is the retention policy and confusion gap within Microsoft 365, right? It has different retention for every single application, such as Exchange Online, SharePoint, Teams, as well as OneDrive. So even, for example, if a user leave the organization, once that user is removed from the organization, his or her data within the next 30 days or after 30 days will be deleted for good. Right, of course, there is always this thing about security threats, right? In this case, internal security threat can be malicious, insider, or disgruntled employees, right? There's always such case. Malicious means purposely remove certain data from the organization, right? Of course, there is always external security threats, especially at this moment, ransomware, rogue application is very prevalent, right? Users are working from home and deemed as more vulnerable as they work beyond the boundary or beyond the security of the company's infrastructure. Of course, the other one will be legal and compliance. most organizations will need to keep documents, emails, right, within Microsoft 365 beyond probably, let's say, 7 years, 10 years, or even 15 years, right? So in terms of compliance requirement, that need to be fulfilled. If not, the company may face drastic measures from governing bodies. Right. Of course, the other thing is that other than backing up Microsoft 365, there are situations whereby customers still have on-prem Exchange or even SharePoint portals on-prem. And if you need such solution, Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 can address those, right? Other than protecting Microsoft 365 in the cloud, Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 has the capability to protect Exchange on-prem as well as SharePoint on-prem. Right, with the last 2 years, collaboration tools is very important, and Teams have grown in terms of usage tremendously, right? And Teams data is kind of different because it provides an overlay and leveraging application from Exchange, SharePoint, as well as OneDrive to store the data, right? Other than backing up those data, you also want to back up and have the capability to restore those metadata within Microsoft Teams. So looking at the product overview of Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, what we want to achieve is to eliminate the risk of losing access to your Microsoft 365 data, right? This includes Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, as well as Teams, right? So from protection point of view, what we want to do is to address those 7 reasons why, right? Accidental deletion, security threats internally or externally, as well as retention gaps, right? You want to have the capability to back up weekly, daily, or even as low as every 5 minutes in a Microsoft format, and the capability to store it anywhere, right? We'll go into that in a later short while. We give our customer the capability to store it, whether is it on local on-prem storage or in the cloud storage such as AWS S3 or Azure Blob Storage. All right. Other than that, we don't talk about just data protection. We want to talk about recovery. How can we help our customers recover fast, right, as and when they need it? So have the various way of recovery, right, or even export, right? So we have 45 ways today and counting, right? Able to restore Microsoft 365 email items, SharePoint sites, document, libraries, and even lists, right? OneDrive for business accounts, files and folders, of course, Microsoft Teams items, including the entire Teams, channels, as well as tabs, right? With this, you also want to have the capability to discover, right? So sometimes users or even the backup administrator do not know where this backup data resides or the items that you want to restore. This email is from who, by who, or what is the keywords that you are trying to restore certain documents. So powerful e-discovery is a must to meet your legal and compliance requirement to effectively discover your 365 backup items and recover quickly. So before we go into the details, let's look at how do you plan your Office 365 backup, right? If you're familiar with Veeam Backup and Replication, Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 has a similar kind of a component. We have the backup server. The backup server is basically the central configuration and control of the whole Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 infrastructure, right? It's responsible for setting up your proxy, your repository, setting up your job scheduler, task coordination, and much more, right? And we have the backup proxy, right? The proxy is always the data mover, the workhorse behind the scene that conducts read and write activities, reading from your Microsoft 365 data sets, and then write them into the backup repository, right? Making sure that depending on your placement of your backup proxy, we can optimize your backup traffic and enable data transfer to happen more efficiently, right? Within regions, stuff like that. Right, of course, last but not least is the backup repository, whereby you store your backup data sets, your 365 data resides in, and it stores important metadata as well as so that you can perform backup and recovery operation efficiently. So let's quickly take a look at the new Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. On the left side, you have what you want to protect, right? We have something in the cloud, Microsoft 365. Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 has a capability to protect Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, as well as Microsoft Teams. Other than that, we also protect Exchange on-prem as well as SharePoint on-prem if you are running in a hybrid environment. Right, and then the next thing is where you want to store your data. We give you the flexibility. You can store your backup data on the local repository, right, on-prem basically, or you want to store it on object storage on-prem. You also have the options to store, or if you want to go hardware asset light, and you want to store your backup data in the cloud, you have the option to go with Amazon S3, Microsoft Azure Blob, IBM Cloud, or anything that is S3 compatible with Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. Right, so this is how you do, you back up your data to the object storage or the local storage on-prem or object storage on-prem. Right, you also have the new feature in version 6 whereby you can create or copy a second backup copy into Glacier or long-term object storage, whereby these are deemed as lower cost storage to store your long-term retention backups, where we leverage Amazon S3, Amazon S3 Glacier Deep Archive, as well as Microsoft Azure Archive. So this second copy of your backup data sets that you store in object storage on-prem or on-prem object storage, right? That is your first copy. You can have a second copy in the archive tiers, right? So coming back, let's look at recovery, restore, right? In terms of recovery, we give our customer the capability of restoring your Exchange, your SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams through our Veeam Explorer tools, right? To give you capability to restore, to send your items or objects that you want to restore to another users, or save them locally or to another location, or export them, right? If you are not going to restore back to Microsoft 365, you have the capability to export them and save them maybe in a file server, right? Or somewhere to save, to keep. If, for example, a user left organization, you want to free up that user from Microsoft 365, but yet you still want those data. Remember the 30 days retention gap that you have for a removed user, right? You can export those data and place them maybe in somewhere external drive or export them, right? Of course, the last one is the self-service restore. This is also an additional feature that we have added into version 6, right? Users helping themselves to perform a recovery or restore on their own, or even assign a restore operator to perform that task on behalf of the IT organization, all right? So in a deployment stage, normally we have two types of deployment. We have a simple deployment and an advanced deployment. In a simple deployment, basically what I meant is it's a single server where your Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 is all in one. It has the proxy, it has the repository built into one single server. Maybe it can even leverage the object storage in the cloud, right? So this is simple deployment. Advanced deployment is whereby you can scale out your deployment by adding more proxy, more repository, right? More than one repository, whereby each region or each countries in your organization may have its own proxy and its own repository, so that it doesn't cross boundary, right? Or it does just to make sure that it address your in-country data sovereignty, right? You can go into that kind of advanced deployment with the flexibility of having scaling out your proxy as well as your repository components, right? So some of the things that you want to think about when you're deploying your servers, right? Our building blocks for the servers are basically 8 core 32 gig RAM, right? Whether you are running a physical server with 8-core processor and 32 gig RAM, or you're running as a virtual machine, or if you're running in the cloud as a EC2 instance or Azure VM, make sure that you assign 8-core and 32 gig RAM to that instance, right? Here are some of the facts and figures that you need to take note when you're deploying, especially in a large environment. The number of objects per VBO instance that it can handle is 1 million. The maximum number of objects per VBO proxy it can handle is 20,000, right? And then maximum users per job is 5,000, right? One job you can handle 5,000 users, right? Number of proxy per VBO. You have one VBO. If you deploy multiple proxy, each VBO can handle up to 50 proxies, right? Maximum users per proxy is 5,000, right? Maximum users per VBO is 250,000, right? Right. RAM, I have said earlier on, is 32 gig optimally, right? And the maximum size per VBO repository is actually unlimited. So I was talking about objects, right? Here, the maximum objects. What do you mean by objects? Let's take a look at it. When you're planning your infrastructure, some of the things that you want to consider will be the objects, right? How do we address object? A primary mailbox is considered objects. A user's own mailbox is one object. If you have archive mailbox that you're trying to back them up, it's also one object. If you are backing up a shared mailbox, all right, a public folders or resource mailbox is considered one object each. All right. If you are backing up a SharePoint portal, a site is one object, communication site, personal site. If you are backing up a OneDrive for business user, for a user is one object, right? If you have 10 users, it's 10 objects. And every Teams is a object as well, right? So that is how we define objects here. Right. When you're doing deployment, like I said earlier, it's very flexible. We do have customers that have the deployment on-prem, whereby everything is on-prem on the left side, on-prem deployment. That means even their storage, they use local storage to store their backup data, right? Of course, you also have we have customers that do not want to have any hardware access. So they go for the public cloud deployment, whereby you can go to AWS or even Azure or even Google Marketplace, and you can find Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, whereby you can deploy those from the marketplace. If you don't want to do that, you can deploy your own instances in your VPC and then install manually the Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 software, right? And of course, we also offer backup as a service or service provider deployment, whereby you engage these vendors, we call them Veeam Cloud Service Providers, to offer you a backup as a service offering to back up your Microsoft 365. So the deployment approach is very flexible. You can choose to do that. All right, so the next consideration is the backup storage flexibility. As early on, I say that we can do local storage, all right, or you can choose object storage. So in terms of object storage, you need to decide where do you want to store your backup, right? So you have an option to decide to store your backup for your Microsoft 365 and object storage, or you can, if you want to use local storage, you have the option to use SAN storage through FC or iSCSI connectivity, or you can use a direct attached storage, a server with a full bunch of disks in there, or you can use SMB, SMB version 3 and onwards, right? So in terms of deployment, I'll show you in the demo later where do you decide whether you want to do a backup for Microsoft 365 or you want to do a hybrid approach. So as said earlier, Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 has the capability to protect Microsoft 365 or these 4 applications on top, as well as 2 application Exchange on-prem, as well as SharePoint on-prem. All right, and protect them with Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. All right, how do you back up and restore with Microsoft 365 objects with Veeam, right? So quickly go through. You want to during the setup of your once you set up you deploy your Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, you set up your proxy, you set up your repository after you decide whether you want to use object or local storage, right? the next thing that you are going to do is to set up your backup job. You want to control the scope of your backup job, right? You have the flexibility to say, in a small deployment, you can easily say, I want to back up the whole organization. Basically, I don't want to segregate my job policy into maybe more granular, whereby I want to base on teams or based on users or based on sites, right? You can choose the whole organization, and then we just back up the whole organization, inclusive of all the Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, as well as Teams, right? Or you can add in Microsoft groups, whereby you can add in, for example, the finance group. And as a new user joins into the Microsoft finance group, that backup policy will automatically include that user into that finance group policy, and it will be included into the next backup schedule. Right. Of course, we also give you the capability to exclude scope. If you choose entire organization and you want to specifically choose certain sites, teams, or even users from the backup, you can do that through the exclusion steps, right? Or you can dynamically exclude certain groups within your organization as well. Right. The thing that I want to highlight here in terms of backup for Teams is that we know that Teams leverage Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, right? We back up those data within these services. But however, there are other metadata that we want to back up, such as the information where those data resides, like contacts, calendar meetings, SharePoints. We have Teams tab, files, tabs, OneNote saved in SharePoint, as well as OneDrive for business, right? Chat files, right? So let me go back. So what you want to do is that on top of those data, you want to have the capability to back up Teams configuration, settings, member, team structure within the Teams channel, right? Once you back them up, those are the metadata. When you want to restore the whole Teams or the channel, you have the capability to restore that metadata, as well as the data will be restored to the respective applications, such as the chat files will go to OneDrive, the OneNote for SharePoint will be restored into SharePoint Online, right? So you want that capability. With Veeam Explorer for Teams, it will help you do that, right? You do not have to do any post recovery steps after you perform a restore. Right. So next is about SLAs, right? So after you set up your backup policies, you want to set up your job scheduler or your RPO. All right, you can define your RPO as low as 5 minutes, right? If you want to have a particular users to have RPO of 5 minutes, you can do that. You can also set that I want to do daily or weekly backup for certain group of users. That is possible, right? So this gives you the capability to define your RPO, and then of course RTO will pertain the length of time to restore a backup and a normal operation to resume a users. So you can do that based on individual users, so that you can quickly restore a users in a couple of minutes. Or if you want to export, right? Of course, export a set of users, a set of OneDrive data out from the backup data will definitely takes longer time, because we need to export them into a zip file and store them somewhere, like such as a file share, right? That normally the RTO will take a bit slightly longer. So recovery options is very important. Early on in my deck, I say there is 45 ways of recovery. Just to highlight some of the capabilities when you talk about recovery, right? At a high level, we have the capability to restore to original location. We have the capability to restore to new location. Right, these are some of the things. We also have the capability to save multiple files as zip file. If you choose, you decide to save some of the files in OneDrive or even from SharePoint. You select a couple of them, you can save them as zip file, or if you are just selecting one file, you can just download them, right? For SharePoint, you can export posts as HTML. You can even export Exchange, a particular user, emails, or the whole mailbox as PST if you want to extract them, right? Export them, right? Or you can send an email, for example, or a file as an attachment to a requester they say, oh, can you send me this file from this particular X staff to me? You can do that, right? Of course, right? Of course, the last but not least is the capability to do self-service restore. All right, the last one, the very important thing is about e-discovery, right? Having the capability to explore backup jobs, explore the whole single organization, or exploring all multiple organization is possible, right? You also can explore within a single point in time. All right, you can choose whether to restore from a latest available state, the last restore backup point, restore point, or you can choose a point in time, maybe 2 years ago. That is also possible, right? So e-discovery is a part of Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. Right, so in short, just want to summarize here, is Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 is to eliminate any risk of losing access to your Microsoft 365 data. You may not lose your data, but you may lose your access to Microsoft 365, which happens in the past in a situation where you have no access to your Microsoft 365 services due to whatever reason. You are still able to extract those backup data, right? And then get your email out for time being, or even your documents out for time being, right? Secure backup to any location, if I say any location, because we support backup to any location, whether backing up to local site on-prem, or you back up to a hyperscaler, for example, AWS S3 object storage, or Azure, or even IBM Cloud, right? Doesn't mean that you have to store your backup data in Azure blob storage, right? So take note, protect your data from accidental deletion, security threat, as well as addressing your retention policy gaps to meet your compliance needs, right? Quickly able to perform restore for individual Microsoft items and files, right? Of course, we have the export component whereby you can move your data out from Microsoft 365 if you want to, right? And last but not least, to meet your legal and compliance requirement. Right, with that, let me go into demo, right? Let me toggle my screen and then go to my demo screen, right? Hope everyone can see it. Right, this is my home lab whereby I have Microsoft 365 set up. Right, before I begin, just to give you a quick heads up, previously the Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 before version 6 is basically you download the installer and you run the installer. With version 6, you basically can download as a ISO, and then you can mount them up. Okay, so when you run it, it basically allows you to install everything. Previously, the main difference here is when you run Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, on top of installing the backup server component, it will also install the Veeam Explorer for Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, as well as Teams, right? So it automatically install everything for you, right? Of course, you can choose to install other component like the console as a separate component separately, as well as a PowerShell, stuff like that, right? I'm not going to run the installer here because since I already have that on my machine. So just to quickly launch this is the Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. I'm actually using a community edition. For those that are not initiated, community edition has the full capabilities, but we restrict it to protect up to 10 users, right? So you can protect up to 10 Microsoft 365 users, right, without paying a single cent, right? And it's a full working feature, right? So once you set up your Microsoft 365 Community Edition, just go through some of the interface. You will see that this is the main console that you will configure and set up everything, right? So just to prove that I'm not using, you look at my license, I'm using Community Edition. I have 10 users. I already used 9 because I'm protecting up to 9 users here. All right, and right, so first before you begin, what you want to do is to add an organization. Just to quickly guide you through, I already added my own organizations. When you are first into this console, always click Add Organization, right? And then you choose the deployment type. Remember, we do support Exchange on-prem as well as SharePoint on-prem. You can choose to backup Microsoft 365 only, or do you want to choose to backup on-prem? That means you are not going to backup any Microsoft 365 objects. You just want to backup Exchange on-prem or SharePoint on-prem. Then you can choose on-prem options, or if you have both, you can choose hybrid. In this case, I have Exchange 365, and I have said that I have the following services running in my environment. I have Exchange Online, I have SharePoint, as well as OneDrive and Teams, right? And then you just go through. So the whole process will be, you will choose which region is your Microsoft 365 being deployed, right? Most of us here should be default, unless you are from China. I don't think anyone in the audience here is from US government or Germany right now, unless your organization is from Germany, right? So by default, you can, what I understand is that most organizations are moving to modern authentication. Microsoft is asking all organizations to move to a modern authentication. I've set up my settings as modern authentication. We do support basic, but moving forward, majority of organizations should be using modern authentication as well. Once you have done that, you click next. You can register Azure application. We use Azure application ID to register the Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, right? If you follow this whole process, you should be able to successfully register your Microsoft 365, register your organization to Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 here. So once you go through that whole process, you should see this organization. In this case, is O365 SE Asia Veeam on Microsoft.com, right? So once you have done that, the next step you want to consider will be setting up the backup infrastructure. By default, when you install Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 on the machine that you run that ISO, that machine will have backup proxy services running. You will have the backup repository, right? If there is no separate disk, you will use the primary disk as the repository, as the default backup repository, right? So from here, what you can do is you can add additional proxy. If your environment is big, you may want to have multiple proxy to handle the number of workloads, right? And then you also can add in repository, right? If you want to use object storage, you will need to come here to add your object storage. And then you go through the process. Let me just put something here called test. And then you can choose S3 object compatible, Amazon S3, Microsoft Azure Blob, or IBM Cloud Object Storage. And then you choose any one of them, right? Make sure before you come to configure your object storage repository here, make sure you have set up your, for example, if you want to deploy in Amazon S3, you make sure that you have set up your S3 bucket in your AWS account, right? And we will need your access key and shared key to connect to the Amazon S3 bucket, right? Same goes for Azure Blob as well as IBM Cloud, right? So if you are using on-prem, of course, you go to S3 object compatible, and then you put in your service point, the region, whatever here. All right. So once you are done, basically we set up, I already set up a backup primary repo here. All right, I'm not going to have additional proxies here, and I will go back to my organization. This is whereby I will set up backup jobs, right? I'm not going to do new backup jobs. I'm going to use one of my existing backup job and just illustrate to you the process. So when you launch your new backup job, what happens here is you ask you for a name, right? You fill in a descriptive name that you understand, right? You can choose to back up the entire organization, or you can choose to select objects, right? In this case, when you click add, you have the option to choose based on per user, based on groups, based on sites, teams, or organization, right? In this case, if I choose based on users, I have break up my backup policy into Exchange, SharePoint, and Teams, right? That is my preference. I like to have an Exchange backup job, I have a SharePoint backup job, and then I have a Teams backup job. All of them may have a different retention policy as well as a different scheduler, right? If you come to one of the users here, or you can select multiple users, you can choose what are the objects to be processed, right? You can choose to backup mail, archive, OneDrive, or sites. If you want to say, I want to include OneDrive in this job as well as sites, you can do that, which means that this user, this backup policy for these users, we will backup emails, OneDrive, and sites all together, right? I'm not going to do a change, right? Once you go there, if you are choosing a group of users, a departmental group, right? You can also add in to exclude certain users, right? So in this case, I choose individual users. I do not need to exclude particular users, right? Unless you choose a department, let's say finance, example, and one of the users admin you may not want to backup, you can add that users into the exclusion list. And then the next thing is you specify the backup proxy as well as the repository, right? So which proxy you want to use to backup the source, the users, and where do you want to store it into which backup repository. In this case, I only have one backup. I have two repositories, but I want to store it into the primary repo here. Right, and then this is the scheduler, right? Very simple. You can choose to run daily. You can choose to run on a particular work day, right? On work days, or you want to choose a particular day, you can do that. Or you want to run it periodically, every 5 minutes to every hour, 8 hours, you can do that, right? In case in your organization, you are backing up everything through your internet-facing connectivity, and there's only one and only, and you have limited bandwidth, you may not want to run your backup job beyond your office hour, into your office hour, right? You just want to run this backup job within after office hour period. You can use these terminate jobs and then specify which hour is permitted to run the backup job, which period or hours is not allowed to run. Yeah, you can choose to deny or permit, right? So you need to highlight and then choose to permit or deny, right? And then when you are done with your backup jobs creation, you can say start the backup job automatically if you do want to wait for the schedule, right? If you want to follow the schedule, you just click save, and then you based on the schedule to run as planned. All right, so very straightforward, right? If you highlight those jobs that's being run before, you can quickly take a summary of your last run job, and then you can see the status of a job, what is successful, what is not successful will be shown here, right? You also can go back to the last 24 hours, right? What are the jobs being run successfully, and our previous day or historical. I set up this 2 days ago, so you don't see a long history here, right? You also can go to the history here to look at jobs that is run, backup, restore, stuff like that. All right. Hopefully, if there is any question, I forgot to mention that you can post your questions in there. I'll try to answer them at the end of I'll try to answer all the questions at the end of the session today. Okay. So just to quickly go through, I've seen some familiar names that probably have used Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. I believe a lot of you have seen some of the interface here and probably use them daily, right? So I just want to show you some of the current common one, and then I'll show you what is the new restore portal, right? So what happens here, if you want to restore, I'll take Exchange, since majority of our customers use Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 for Exchange. I'm going to just do this demo here. I'm going to launch a restore point, right? We'll tell you because I have chosen object storage. Every time you touch object storage, there will be a transaction API calls that cost you some money, right? And it will be billed by your cloud provider. So this warning message will always pop up unless you click this button here and not to show the message anymore, right? So what happened here, if you click a restore point, you go to that particular restore point and show you all the user stuff like that, right? And then you can go to the users and then you can perform the necessary compare with production, right? You will see all those mails that you have backups. I done one quick update backup just before this event. So it should have all those things, right? And then you are able to perform restore to the same user or restore to another users or folders, right? You can even export as PST, the whole inbox, or you can export everything to a PST if you choose that user, right? And you also can do a comparison with production by comparing whatever is at this restore point inbox with the current production, right? It just gives you the delta so that you choose the right things to restore, not accidentally restore, right? Of course, the advanced e-discovery function that you can do to search through everything, right? You can add and create a query list, right? I'm just randomly putting in. If you look at the all fields, you can also see the capability to choose multiple type of fields if your Exchange administrator put in all the necessary information, right? From who, right? Maybe from someone called Dean to this, and then you can create a long list and then you start the search cycle. You can search through, this is not going to find anything, but what happens is it's going to scan through everything. You choose from inbox, you scan through inbox. If you choose from the organization, you scan through the whole organization. Every single users within that organization will be searched based on the search criteria here. All right. One of the key things that I just want to highlight, I think that is a lot of feedback that our customer have asked is the concern at what if my backup administrator go and read my management or my CEO email. Of course, as an administrator, you are the most powerful person. You are the backup administrator. You can see any data, right? Of course, you can double click and then you can see the content. You can even let's say we don't do the preview here. Someone may, as a administrator, you can restore the item to somewhere else, right? And then preview that or access that email, right? Whatever you do here, do note that, right? We capture your history, right? All the hanky-panky stuff you're trying to do will be captured in the log here, right? So those things will be executed here, right? And capture. If we try to retrieve stuff like that, right, will be restored, captured here, right? So if I go, right, so this is a thing that we used to have this concern, right? And I just want to using this to move on to tell you that we address this concern here, right, through our self-service portal. Let me minimize this screen here, right, and then go to my Outlook. Right, so we have OneDrive, a user here, refresh, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to let me quickly go here and then just want to make sure that I'm accessing. Okay, user one, right? Just to take note, user one. I'm going to do some deletion here. I'm going to delete these couple of users here, and then I'm going to do a delete. I'm going to go to delete here, and then I'm going to just make sure that I empty those folders. Of course, you can go to recover items and then delete whatever, empty the folder and force it clean so that I cannot self-service and restore those data. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I come into my self-service portal. You're going to see the item over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do two type of demo, all right, illustration here. One is to use service-user1 to perform its own recovery. All right, so I'm going to enter the user's name. So let's say I'm the user service-user1. I'm going to do my own self-service restore. Right, I'm going to enter my username. Oh, sorry. All right. Click enter. Because I'm using modern authentication, there'll be a prompt coming out in a short while. Oh, because I logged in before, sorry. So just for information, I log in, I will see my own data sets, right? And I only can see my own here. All right, user one, user two, and user one for my email, my OneDrive, as well as my SharePoint. We don't offer self-service restore portal for Teams at this, right? So if I'm going to click here, I'm going to go to my inbox. Okay. I'm going to do a refresh again. Okay, I can choose to restore. I can add multiple users if I want to restore them, right? Or I can, all right, if I choose multiple, let's say I want to choose this guy here, I can add to the restore list, right? You can see a restore list here, whereby I can choose to restore, okay? Or I can add more things. Let's say I want to probably go to my, let's see whether I have anything here. All right, maybe I just want to say use teen. I can choose that and then I can add to the list. So you can add more than one items. If you are you have more than one thing that you want to restore, you can select from other container here, like outbox. If you have something, sorry, not outbox. Normally outbox don't have anything. Let's say you have send item, you want to restore something from here, you can add them here, right? So you can basically build up your restore item rather than doing one item at a time to restore. You can do this, right? So once you do that, you can perform a restore. And then you click next. You can choose to go to original location. In this case, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to choose a new location, right? I can do that, and then you can just say this is a demo, and click next, and finish. And you can, like this will run at the background. Okay, and then items. Right, so if there is something that is conflicting, will be skipped, not be restored and overwrite the existing email in your environment. All right. Also want to quickly share with you, other than doing self-service restore, you also can nominate a operator. All right. In this case, service user one is an operator. Right. You can start to change scope into a different user. Let's say this service user one is the operator for these few nominated users. You can choose to change scope, right? When you change scope, the restore explorer will change to the user number 8 here, and you can perform restore for them, right? Do note that you notice that in this mode of the self-service restore portal, whether you are the operator or you are the user itself that trying to perform the restore, you will not be able to preview the content of the item that you want to restore, right? Let's say, for example, um, team chat or backup, stuff like that, you should not be able to see what's in the content at all, right? Right. So you even you choose something like that, you only can perform restore, or you can add this list, and you can't choose any other stuff, right? If you have multiple version, you can choose the version. Let's say you have 3 version, you can choose the not the latest backup, you can choose an older version that you have performed backup before and restore the older version of that document, right? So that you can roll back to the document that you edited wrongly. All right. With that, that's about my end of my almost my end. Just want to show you where can you set up the self-service restore configuration. You will notice that you will need to set up a restore portal whereby you need to enable some application ID, stuff like that, and configure the cert. Everything is guided, available in our tech document to guide you through. You will also need to enable the REST API. The REST API whereby the portal will talk to the RESTful API, not directly to the storage, right? And then connect to it. Well, the other thing that you need to be aware of, the self-service portal need to be a FQDN format, not like a host name or a local dot. For example, it cannot be something that a host name colon 4443. That's it. It need to be something like that in the FQDN format with a port 4443 to access the portal. Okay. Okay. Before I end that demo, let's wrap it up before I go to the Q&A. Right. So just to let you know, all right, Veeam Backup, these are some of our customers that love us, right? And we have been rated top in Tech Radius G2, right? We also have some of the goodies that you want to read more about Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. Get your camera ready. You can use the QR code here to access the Microsoft Teams Backup conversation guide here. You also can use this to read up understanding our 365, and then also how to some of the tech consideration that I've said earlier in the session. All right, tech consideration for Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. All right, hopefully you got those. And then last but not least, if you want to try it yourself and want to use it, just want to use for 10 users, you can use our community edition. But if you want to test it out in your environment with more than 10 users, you can go to go.veeam.com/backupoffice-365 and download the trial version for 30 days where you can cover more than, I think, more than 500 users kind of test environment, right? Go there and download a 30 days trial. After 30 days trial, what will happen is that software will revert it back to a community edition, and then you can continue to protect the 10 users that you think most important, right? With that, we'll go for open Q&A. All right, there's a couple of questions here. Let me quickly go through one by one. Will there be recording? Yes, there will be a recording. After recording, there will be a link sent to you guys, and by you, I think it will be take a couple of days. Then we'll share it with you. Right. There are also other recordings on Microsoft 365. You can go to veeam.com and search under resources, webinar, where we talk a lot other stuff, and some of them are even deeper or even demos on how to set up Microsoft 365. For regions, okay. Hold on. sorry, let me quickly. Hold on, give me a while. Let me sort out this. Okay, I have some. Sorry. Give me a while. Let me quickly bring up something first. Okay. 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 Okay, I'm just trying to get my question out and running before I continue. Okay, for region, can we specifically select Singapore? No, you can't choose the Singapore. Basically, you choose global, and based on your organization, where your Azure organization resides, then I mean, based on the Microsoft 365 organization, we will connect to your Microsoft 365. So you don't have to specifically choose Singapore, right? Right, and the only time that you need to specifically specify is during your setup for your object storage. If you, let's say, you want to set up your S3 bucket in Singapore, Southeast Asia, right? Singapore, you will do that, right? So that the data where we back up to will be going to that bucket resided in Southeast Asia, Singapore, or Azure via your Azure blob. It will be Southeast Asia in Singapore region. Does Veeam have any cloud-based solution for Microsoft 365 where we don't have to, let me quickly, yeah, I assume let me quickly highlight those. We don't have to install anything on-prem. Like I said earlier on, one way is that if, let's say, you don't want to install anything, you can go to approach our VCSP, Veeam Cloud Service Provider, whereby they offer Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 as a backup software as a service approach, right? If you are talking about you still want to own the license, you can deploy the workload in. You can deploy the Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 in the hyperscaler aspects, right? So we do have customers that deployed everything in Microsoft Azure, or even some of them even do to the extent of doing it everything in Microsoft, in AWS, right? So that they want to make sure that and if anything happened to Microsoft site, they still have their backup in S3 and in Amazon, right, and able to do the recovery. At this moment, okay, there's one more question. Can I know, do the community version support immutability? At this juncture, the current version, we do not support immutability, right? Even for the object storage. Probably some of you may know that the other product, Veeam Backup and replication, we do support immutability for object storage, but for Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 at this moment, it's not available. Even if, let's say, you turn on S3 object lock, right? It's not available at this moment. It will be our next version. Restore screen from S3. Can you show us the restore screen from S3 or Azure? Okay, I'll come to that. Where do we set the retention period? The retention period is set within the repository. So if you do a comparison with our other products, our retention policy normally set within the backup policy. In Veeam backup for Microsoft 365, the retention is set within the repository. Okay, maybe I'll just quickly go to, oops, here, and quickly go back to my screen here and cancel, go to backup infrastructure, repository, edit. Through the setting out a repository, you specify the retention policy here. So you can choose to go number of days or years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 25, or keep forever, right? So you can set that retention policy. So in an event that your policy is removed, in some cases you may remove your policy, but because you already back up those data in that repository, that policy will have no impact to those data already back up in the retention in the repository anymore. All right, I'll come back to the restore screen from S3. All right, is there an option to auto reconnect to Microsoft 365? There is no need for you to reconnect, because the connection will be established once you are on board your organization. Once you add in the organization, you should not having to do the reconnect, right? How to put M365 backup to tapes. There is no tape out option within Microsoft 365, Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. However, you can use Veeam Backup and Replication to perform tape out on for your repository data, backup data. So, but that only works if you are using local storage, not S3 bucket or blob storage. We don't do backup from S3 or object storage, to say, right? In short, we don't backup from object storage. But if you store your 365 backup data in a local repository or a SAN, SMB type of repository, you can back up those repository using Veeam Backup and Replication to a tape, and you don't have to restore everything back to Veeam Backup and back to the repository. You can read from the tape, right, and then perform a restore directly using Veeam Explorer for Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive to restore your data sets, right? And that's possible. I always need to reconnect due to inactive, although backup job is running. You should not have to reconnect. I mean, if you are reconnect, I'm not too sure what you mean, but reconnect is basically if your console has a I would say a timeout, then of course there will be a reconnection requirement. But if you are saying that the organization, you already add in the organization, right, and it get disconnected, something like that, that is not normal. Do approach, if you have a contract with us, do drop a support email, right, or through your my.veeam.com portal to submit your case and get our support to look into it. Can backup share, right? So can backup share mailbox? Yes, we do backup share mailbox. We have China Cloud, but we do not see any China Cloud. So 365 do not support. We do have the option to backup China here. Okay, we do have the options. All right. Hope I answer your questions. So you can choose to backup from China, right? How do you retrieve from the user after my backup, right? If let's say after I remove the backup job, okay, what you can do is you can go to Veeam Explorer, choose one of these things, right? And of course, if that you need to remember where is your user, right? Of course, if let's say in the later state you do not have the user in the backup states, of course you need to go back to certain times, stuff like that, to choose the restore point that the user resides, right? If not, you get an error that couldn't be found, right? Show items that have been deleted by users, show all version also can be done here. All right. So you have to choose a Veeam Explorer as well. If you currently running VBR and have a paid license, can we merge? No, you can't merge VBR and I'll say 365 because both licenses are different, and both backup infrastructure is also different. Okay. But I never see any China cloud. What do you mean by China cloud? I don't understand these questions. All right, this is to backup 365 in China. All right, of course, when you want to backup, the only challenge will be I foresee is that you probably will need to set up a repository within China. I think in terms of data sovereignty, you may not be able to pull the data out from China due to their security control over there. So you may need to deploy a proxy as well as a repository within the China uh, uh, region, right? So that you can back up your data sets within that location. So you probably may not be able to add object storage in this case. For example, let's say I do it here, click next, and then if let's say you choose Microsoft Azure, for example, you definitely will not be able to see anything from, you can see China here if you want to, if you use Azure. So if you are looking for something in this case and you are not able to see it, please reach out to our support, right? And then they were able to guide you from there and have a better visibility if you submit your support logs. All right. So I think I went through all the questions except for one more. Can you show us the restore screen from S3? What do you mean restore screen? Our restore screen, normally when we restore from here. All right. So let's say I choose this case, right? You do not need to select where to restore from, right? So all my backup data actually resides from the S3. So basically, if I choose anything that I want to restore, will be prompted such questions here. I will need to authenticate, right? Because it's model authentication. Sorry, let me quickly go here. Oops, sorry. I need to copy the code. Go to here, enter the code, click next. Of course, they're going to ask me some questions. I'm going to use this administrator, continue. Of course, if you are doing the first time, they'll ask you for the password, right? But I've done a couple of times in this single session, and then you perform a restore, right? So you don't have to say restore screen from S3. There is no restore screen from S3 or Azure, right? That is transparent. Once you set up your repository, where you store your repository, the backup will go to that respective repository, whether it's a local storage or in Azure to pull those data here, right? So those are things that I'm doing. I'm doing a whole bunch of things at one time. All right. So with that, that ends my session. Thank you for your time. All right, I overran 15 minutes, but thank you for the questions. Hope I answer most of your questions. Right. Thank you.